Hello, everyone, and I just want to welcome everyone to today's Rectangle Health's webinar on how to meet HIPAA requirements without breaking the budget. So my name is Derek Torbeck here with the webinar team here at Rectangle Health, and we couldn't be more excited to present to you this today. And of course, you see Audrey Warren on the screen, and I'll be introducing her momentarily, um, where she'll be sharing her knowledge with our group today. Before we jump into the main event, if you aren't familiar with Rectangle Health, just a quick little background. We simplify HIPAA compliance, patient engagement, reminders, and payments for over 36,000 dental and medical practices through our practice management bridge solution. So how about a little bit of housekeeping today? So of course, many of you are probably wondering if this is your first time with us about the CE credit portion. So we will let you know when the CE portion is over. And you'll be receiving a follow-up communication with that CE credit information about a couple of weeks after the event. So that will be sent directly to your email. Importantly, we want you to stay to the end anyway. After the CE portion is over with, I'll be dropping a couple important links in the chat that Audrey will expand upon during the after part of the presentation. You will be receiving follow-up communication from us that includes slides and recordings, so don't worry about that. Couple of other important notes for you as well is we will be having polling questions throughout our presentation. It's our way to make sure that you're paying attention, that you're involved, and we kind of go back to that just to ensure we see everyone that's been on our webinar and can get the CE credits. There is also a survey at the end of the webinar today. We really appreciate it if you could fill that out for us. It's something that we've been doing just with our last couple of webinars, wanting to find out more from you, learn a little bit about you, see if you need follow-up right away. That just a very good, and it'll only take about a minute or so. So it's good for us to kind of just learn from you. So now I'd love to introduce our speaker today, who needs no introduction, but her name is Audrey Warren, Senior Vice President of Products here at Rectangle Health. So Audrey brings over a decade of product leadership experience in healthcare with a focus on simplifying complex systems through smart, user-centered design. And at Rectangle Health, she leads product strategy to help practices stay compliant, efficient, and patient-focused. So with that being said, Audrey Warren, it's over to you in your capable hands. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Derek. I appreciate that. I've been with Rectangle Health for about a year now. So excited to be in the space. I oversee a couple of different products in our portfolio, but compliance is near and dear to my heart. So we got a lot of content to get through. I'm going to jump into it. We're going to cover the basics. We're going to talk about maybe how HIPAA compliance looks in your office. We're going to talk about the rules and safeguards, get into the details. We're going to talk about some scary stuff and how it can be not so scary. We're going to talk about the tools that you put in place in order to protect yourself, your patients, etc. And then we'll give you some tips on how you can implement this in your practice today. So I'm going to go fast. I hope y'all are up for a high energy presentation today. So we'll talk with a little bit about history here. The HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It's enforced by the Office of Civil Rights, which is a department within HHS, Health and Human Services. First rules of HIPAA came into being in 1996. So those of you that were working in healthcare know it was a very different place back in 1996. No one was using electronic health records. Everything was by paper, etc. But it was intended to simplify and reduce administrative processes and burdens along with the privacy and security rules. We know that was a great shift in technology. And you saw, if you were in healthcare, that things shifted to being almost entirely online now, with almost every practice using some sort of electronic health record to run their business. In 2013, the Omnibus Rule came into being, which specifically addressed electronic forms of PHI or EPHI, which sounds a little dated now, but that's what it's called within the legislation. So this was a way to modernize the threats to businesses online. Before that, before 96, there was just little standardization or requirements of the healthcare industry to protect patients' data. And I like to pause for a moment there because At the end of the day, you and I are patients. So not only do we work in healthcare, but we also consume healthcare, and we've got children and parents and people that we love that are visiting physicians and doctors every day. So what I love about compliance is it's really at the heart protecting patient data the same way that you would want your data protected by your practitioners. So with that, we're going to jump into some of the details. All right, so what is PHI? I'm sure a lot of you know this, but just as a refresher, PHI specifically refers to individually identifiable health information. So there's a lot of different examples of PHI here. And the important part is on their own or combined, they can be considered PHI. The more of these that you combine, the more one could learn about your health that could be considered PHI. Even the name of your practice plus a patient name can be interpreted as PHI. So it is best to think of all of these individually and combined as PHI, names, medical records, social security numbers, things that don't necessarily have a health definition in them are still under the PHI umbrella. So anything that's personally identifiable, you as a someone working in healthcare should really treat as PHI. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to keep going and address that later. So let's talk about how you HIPAA. So sometimes people think, oh, we've got it. We've got it under control. We've got sort of casual approach to HIPAA. And then others have a more formal and secure. There is really only one way to do HIPAA. It's very clear in the legislation. What are the rules? And so we'll go into some of those. But in general, the casual approach means it's a vulnerable approach. There's no we kind of do HIPAA. And to achieve formal security and compliance, you have to have a few things in place, like employee acknowledgement of all of the procedures and processes that govern your use of data. You have to have a designated training officer. You have to have a documented risk assessment. We'll talk about that. It's a really important component. You have to have a formal emergency plan and an incident response team. And all of this allows you to invest a little bit of time up front to protect yourself and your patients from potential vulnerabilities in the future. So let's talk about HIPAA training requirements. A lot of times folks think, oh, HIPAA is the training, and that is a component of it. You'll hear me say this a lot. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So formally within HIPAA, the requirements don't tell you what training you should take, but it must adhere to these criteria. It must be reproducible. So you must be able to reproduce the information that was used to train your team. So if Janice is the one that just kind of walks people through what HIPAA is, that does not meet the requirement of reproducibility. So it has to be something that you can put your virtual hands on and reproduce if you were ever in a situation where you had an audit. You have to be accountable. So you have to have a mechanism by which you ensure that your team paid attention to and understands the training information. Since HIPAA, for some, is not the most exciting subject, it's important to make sure that that you're validating this. Oftentimes that's through a quiz or some other mechanism by which you kind of can validate that they have retained some of that information. And then finally, you have to have an acknowledgement form on in your paperwork. So for financial protection as well as for any audits, you need to have those employee acknowledgements within your HIPAA binder. And that must be completed every 12 months. And it must be completed when you have new staff coming into your practice. So preferably before they ever touch PHI, you will have them complete their HIPAA training, which can be challenging if you have a training where you close your office and you do the training once a year. It's hard to get people up to speed. But that is a requirement that you don't have people working in your office that haven't yet received their HIPAA training. All right, let's jump into some of the rules. There's 3 rules in HIPAA: privacy rule, security rule, and a breach notification rule. So we'll walk you through all of What those mean, the privacy rule is really about protecting the personal health information. And it also gives patients an array of rights as to how they can access that information as well. So that's the accessibility part of HIPAA. The general rule is that a covered entity must obtain the written authorization for any use or disclosure of protected health information. A lot of you know this. It is the form that you get someone to sign in writing in specific terms to disclose information to someone outside of your practice. So this rule covers scenarios like disclosing information to a school or an employer or a life insurance company. It must be made in writing. It must it must be tailored to your company or organization, and it must tell what types of information can or cannot be disclosed. All right. Permitted uses and disclosures. When do you not necessarily need to have that written authorization for disclosure? The most obvious one is to the individual. You do not need anything on file for that. Treatment patient and healthcare operators. So if you are giving information from a doctor to a doctor for the treatment, payment, or healthcare operations, you do not need a separate signature on file from the patient to authorize that. That is within the normal operating duties of a practice. Patient can agree or object to disclosures with family members. Sometimes if parent walking in with a 5-year-old child, the 5-year-old child does not need to give written permission for the parent to be in the room with them. However, in some cases and some specialties, there are some special state-by-state rules, some mental health, family planning, things like that. We encourage you to be aware of both the state recommendation or the state legislation as well as your specialty specific legislation in that state. And then incident 2 refers to any time when a permitted use and disclosure, when something happens that is in the course of a normal permitted use and disclosure. So for example, if you were speaking with a patient in a normal voice at the front counter and disclosed something that would be PHI, and someone somewhere else in the room overheard that, and it can be defended that that was under normal circumstances with appropriate care to not expose using the minimum necessary rule, then that is within the incident 2 permitted uses and disclosures. All right, HIPAA security rule. HIPAA security rule is about keeping the information safe. So there's 3 components to this, and this is a really good way to think about HIPAA in general. I often bring this up. There are administrative safeguards, there are technical safeguards, and then there are physical safeguards. So that makes sense, right? You have to have your policies and procedures in place that govern what you do with your data, how the office is run. That's almost like an umbrella, especially when you layer in the HIPAA security risk assessment. It really goes over it's kind of a superset of information because it goes through all of those asked questions about administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. The technical safeguards specifically refer to how are you protecting data in the electronic form and on the web. So everything electronically is covered through the technical safeguards, both through your EHR, through your email encryption, etc. And then physical safeguards, how secure is your physical location? Can you lock the rooms with your records in it, for example? Do you know who has access to that locked room? Those are the types of things that are covered in physical safeguards. All right, so these are some things that we hear all the time. My IT firm handles my HIPAA compliance, so thank you very much. I don't need any extra help. Again, you'll hear me say this a lot. This is true. It's necessary, but not sufficient. It's part of HIPAA is to have make sure that you have your HIPAA compliance is taken care of through your IT department, but that leaves the administrative and the physical safeguards kind of unmanaged. My practice management software is HIPAA compliant. Well, I sure hope so. If it's not, we have a different problem. But let's assume that everyone's practice management software is HIPAA compliant. That is necessary, but not sufficient to meet your HIPAA requirements. General liability policy will protect me. If you roll like that, that's an approach, but it should be noted that if you do have a general liability policy and you're kind of ensuring that, well, if anything happens, whatever I'm liable for, a data breach or whatever, I'm insured, so it's okay. Oftentimes those insurances are tied to your completing all of the things that we're talking about. So if you do not have, for example, a HIPAA risk assessment, or if your staff has not taken their training, then the policy will not pay out. So it's important to know kind of what are the details of your general liability policy. It's great protection, but it doesn't cover you in all cases. My office manager is on top of it. I know she is. Like, we all know what hard work that your office staff puts in. But the metaphor here is taxes. You wouldn't want to just give your office manager a bunch of receipts and say, hey, can you just do the taxes for the business? There's a lot of subtleties and rules. And so having someone to support you in that who is a professional who understands the legislation is really important in the long run. So office manager is often the compliance officer who is then using tools that helps her maintain that physical IT and administrative security measures. All right. And it only matters for large organizations. You guys know better than that. HIPAA is important for everyone for all the reasons that we've talked about. So, general rule for HIPAA security. Let's see here. The HIPAA binder is kind of where everything lives. It can be virtual, it can be physical, it can be both. But everybody's got to be able to lay their hands on it. It's got to be customized. It has to include copies of your security and privacy breach notification policies. What happens if you find out that there was a breach? Those protocol need to be in place before it happens. You have your staff guidelines. You have your business associates agreements, and we'll get into that. Patient forms, such as a notice of privacy practices. Again, that can live in your EHR. It could be digital, but it's part of this larger HIPAA binder. Annual risk assessment, privacy and incident documentation. When something does happen, there's different ways to document it, and that documentation needs to live in perpetuity in your HIPAA binder. And then you can also use that to manage other things like your IT distribution of your IT software to your employees. So I think we are at our first polling question. Derek, take it away.
Yes, how exciting. So chat, which of these is not one of the three key HIPAA safeguards? Physical safeguards, office safeguards, technical safeguards, or administrative safeguards? We'll give everyone just about 10 or 15 seconds to answer, and I'll let you all know how you are answering. Looks like we're getting some good responses. Okay. Well done, chat. I'm going to end this. 73% of you said office safeguards. So back to you, Audrey.
Thanks. That was a little tricky. I mean, administrative and office, those are kind of similar concepts, but good job with that one. Let's see here. Let's talk about the breach notification rule. I hope none of you are intimately familiar with this, but there are some very specific requirements if there is a breach. And a breach just meaning that your personally identified, your PHI has been breached. Someone has access to it that should not have access to it. So there are three reasons why a practice would be investigated by the Office of Civil Rights regarding HIPAA. One is just a general audit. They pick your name out of a list and they say it's time for an audit. Another would be a data breach. It's the most popular. And the third would be a complaint filed by a patient or a previous employee or anyone really. It doesn't matter where the complaint comes from. So the data breach notification rule, if that is a reason why you would be investigated, needs to document pieces of information in a breach. First, they need to know what happened, what was compromised, how, and to complete an investigation of the details. That's a written record of on this date, this thing happened, and then we knew that this many records were taken in this way. Very formal. Patients need to be notified within 60 days. In some cases, depending on how how many records were breached, you are required to put a media notification. And in some situations, if it's high enough, uh, that would be in case it's 500 or more. Requires a media notification. So putting something in the local paper or somewhere where a reasonable person could run across this notification. And HHS needs to be notified, depending again on that, whether you're above or below 500. Breaches lower than 500, you must notify at the end of the year, by the end of the year. 500 and above, you must notify within 60 days. I'm sorry, 500 patients must be notified within 60 days. Breaches over 500 must be notified immediately. And there is a website that the HHS maintains that has those breaches. So it is a public website that is searchable by your patients or your colleagues or whomever, that would expose that notification to HHS. HIPAA violation penalties. There's 4 different buckets of penalties, and they're all really related to what is the culpability of the practice. So tier 1, it's kind of I struggle to find an example of this, but if you were in a tier 1, it's 100 to 50,000 each, 100 being the lowest. There's no knowledge of a breach and there's no reasonable accommodation to avoid it. So a breach happened, but it was really unavoidable. The practice is doing everything you can to adhere to the HIPAA legislation and to protect your patient's data, and still something happened. So that would be that tier 1. Tier 2, in contrast, is a violation where a provider should have been aware of the possibility of a violation. So, for example, if you are discussing patient PHI in a hallway or in another patient's room where it's just obvious that that's not the right place to do that, that would be tier 2. Tier 3, we're getting pretty pricey here, 10,000 to 50,000 per violation. That's the willful neglect. That's the I'm not going to worry about it. What's the likelihood of something happening? And this one is if there's willful neglect, but there is efforts within 30 days to reconcile the violation in question. And then tier 4 is willful neglect and no effort made towards rectifying that violation. All right. So what does due diligence look like? What is that sort of, where do you fall on this? Well, having your program in place, making sure that all of those documentation that we discussed and we'll continue to discuss is in place in your binder. You can put your hands on your binder. All of that really matters as to where you are here. There's a lot of discretion with the Office of Civil Rights to be able to administer fines that are commensurate with kind of the culpability of the organization. All right, so let's talk about business associates, because business associates fit into this fine thing. A business associate could have a breach, and if you have a business associates agreement with them that defines kind of how they agree to take on the responsibility of all of the HIPAA requirements, you are protected. But if you do not have a business associate agreement in place, that burden falls back on you, even if you don't employ that person full time. So a business associate is a person or an entity that performs certain functions that involve the use or disclosure of protected health information. So you can think of these as your practice management solution, your EHR, your IT providers, your claims processing vendors, even services that are a little adjacent, like your paper disposal, your protected paper disposal. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name right here. Even those, because they have interactions with PHI, need to have a business associate agreement in place. Other services, such as couriers or janitors or your own employees, are not considered business associates under this. So there's it's mostly black and white. If it's someone that you employ to interact with your PHI, then you absolutely need a business associate in place. All right. Everyone here is a covered entity if you work for a hospital or a practice. And you are very likely sharing information with a business associate as today. So an example is your EHR software. A very common workflow would be that your patient presents at your office, services are provided and documented in your EHR. Your EHR likely has access to your patient's PHI. And because this is a function that is your business needs in order to provide care, this falls under the general treatment and healthcare operations that we talked about. So you don't necessarily need a written consent to a form for the patient to share your data with your EHR. However, you do need a BAA with your EHR vendor, and probably that's in your contracts when you got it. But you need to have it. You need to be able to put your hands on it, and it needs to be in your binder. So they're outlining the terms in which they have access to your patient data, and they're promising in that business associate agreement to make sure that they adhere to all of the regulations of HIPAA. Very important. Let's go through an example of what might happen if you are not following this protocol. So this is a real story. You can Google it. North Memorial is a healthcare provider who had an IT company, Accretive Health, that was providing a service that should have been covered under a business associate agreement. An employee in that IT company had a laptop stolen, which resulted in a data breach of about 10,000 individuals and a subsequent Office of Civil Rights investigation. Office of Civil Rights found that they did not have a BA in place. And because they did not have a BA in place, the risk went back onto North Medical, and they were fined $1.5 million for a HIPAA violation. It's an extreme example, but you can see how that might play out in a smaller practice, especially one where you have a lot of folks that might be providing services. And if you haven't had a compliance officer or a really formal HIPAA security program, you can see how maybe a BAA might have slipped through the cracks. All right. We've gone through this a little bit, but just to put a fine point on it, other business associates that have contract exemptions, no BAA required. Anything that's really in the course of providing regular service. So laboratory government activities required by law, like Medicare, your payments processor, janitors, electricians, landlords, etc. Don't need a BAA with the U.S. Postal Service or FedEx or your employees. Derek, what's up?
Yes, I am back with another polling question. So let's fire that away for you, chat. So if a patient feels that their privacy has been violated by the dental practice, the patient may file a formal complaint directly to the dentist or to Department of Agriculture, Department of Dentists, Department of Health and Human Services for Civil Rights, or the Department of Compliance. We'll give everyone a couple minutes. Give everyone about 15 seconds. We've got on the rest of Audrey's awesome presentation to go. So looks like we're getting a lot of responses. Give everyone a few more seconds. Well done, well done. 85%, Audrey, they have gotten the Department of Health and
Okay,
Human
two
Services for
guys.
Civil
That's great.
Rights.
I said it enough. Yeah, you want to know their name, but you never want to hear them knocking. So let's keep going. Oh, I hope your patient data isn't under attack, but it could be. 73% of cyber breaches are due to unintentional human factors. We'll talk a little bit about that. They have been cyber breaches. You know this. This is in the news. I'm sure that whether you talk about it or whether you just read about it, it's a concern, especially since 2020. We've had a significant increase in cyber breaches. I want to talk a little bit about how much why who cares if I had a a molar removed last year. It's the real reason behind cyber breaches, especially as it pertains to healthcare, is that those records are very valuable on the black market. A healthcare record can go from $100 to $1,000 on the black market. And the reason is not necessarily because they are interested in your dental procedures, but because they are interested in the data that healthcare providers gather to just give services and to get paid. It is more information than you give to a retail store. It's more information than you give to most people. So you have names, sometimes social security numbers. The real trifecta is when you have some demographic data, you have a social security number, and a copy of their driver's license, which is often included in a lot of patient records. That gets you top dollar on the black market. And that's why patient data is under attack. It's the main motivator. If I'm trying to make some money, I'm going to start fishing around, literally fishing with a PH, to try to get into a practice. And if I was a hacker, I'd be looking at smaller practices with maybe less sophisticated security protocol and security IT safeguards. So, as we know, a lot of these are actually kind of not brute force. They are more social engineering. We'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so email encryption. Email is one of the most common areas of PHI exposure. Mobile email is driving more fraud and data breaches. We see a shocking amount of folks, and no shame if your practice does this, but let's talk about it. Using just Gmail and Yahoo, especially personal email addresses. Small practices may just employ just a Yahoo or Google account. If I can give you one piece of advice today, it would be to ensure that your office is using encrypted email to communicate with patients, even when you think you're not communicating PHI. It's important that you have a email service provider that can ensure that you are encrypting your email end to end, because that is a very common entry point into getting into a practice. All right, phishing. So we know about phishing, but we also need to be diligent all the time. Phishing is going up. In fact, the majority of ransomware and cyber breaches are due to the social engineering. Someone getting information about a practice to get into their systems from impersonating someone else and trying to get that person to disclose actively or passively some information to them. So let's see here. You guys can type this into the chat. Anyone see any red flags on this one? Is anyone going to call this number? Derek, I don't know if you have, I can't see the chat up here, so I'll take it from you if anyone is smart enough to find the flags.
Didn't see anyone finding the flags yet.
They're all finding them themselves. I
But
know
they
it's
are
hard to
probably
speak up.
finding them, yes.
I know. Sense of urgency here. Quick. This really needs to happen now. A phone number that you call, that's weird. I don't know that phone number. And it is being staffed by criminals. So just because it has a phone number and just because you didn't click the link does not mean that you're out of the woods. This phishing quiz with Google.com, we have no affiliation with them. It's just a fun activity to do to see if you would be able to spot some of the more sophisticated phishing attacks that are coming through. We see them all the time. We do sort of war games kind of internally in our organization. It's very common to send out a notification from our security team pretending to be a phishing, and then seeing how many people in the organization actually flag it as phishing. So we take security very serious at Rectangle Health, and I know that you guys do as well. This is just one of the major entry points for cyber criminals. Not just for email anymore. Unfortunately, texting as well. I worked for a company that my CEO got scammed, and it was a major incident. So very sophisticated ways of kind of fooling folks, but in general, never share your two-step code outside of real-time verification process. Do not don't even reply to these numbers. So just marking them as spam and moving on if you have anything that is out of the ordinary through your telephone. All right, I hope that this is never something that you guys have to encounter in real life. What is ransomware? It is a malicious software that was installed on your computer or your server that encrypts files. It locks, typically, it locks your screen or encrypts your files so that you do not have access to them. A ransom is requested, typically through Bitcoin. It creates a sense of urgency for payment, and there's no real reason for them not to continue to lock your systems. The most common penetration is through an email download that we just talked about. So you click on a link that installs an executable on your file on your local machine that then is able to infect your server and able to lock down your and encrypt your files. So this is not the screen that you want to see when you walk into the office in the morning. Let's see here. I'm going to keep moving on from that. We'll say let's talk about investing, protecting your investment. So we talked a little bit about this. Cyber insurance is not a requirement for HIPAA, but the catch is here that if you do want to be financially protected, then you do need to be adhering to all of the HIPAA requirements. And it's also important to see if your insurance policy covers things like audit fines, employee errors, loss of profits to the business. A lot of times these are exempt from insurance policies, even if they do kind of generally have a catch-all around cyber insurance. Some of those are carved out, and those can be the most important and most expensive part of dealing with a breach or a ransomware. Wow, here we are on polling question number 3. I think we're doing really well. We've got
Sure.
several more
Sure
slides
are,
to go.
Audrey. Yes, that's right. Sure are. Let's get into our final polling question here with you, chat. And it's dentists who electronically transmit patients' protected health information in connection with transactions like insurance claims or benefit eligibility are considered which of the following? Covered owners, entities, third parties, or beneficiaries? We'll give our participants about 15 seconds or so to answer. And a lot of answers in. Okay, well done. Over 70% or close to 70% covered entities, Audrey.
All right, so you guys are going to get really familiar with all of the jargon with HIPAA, and I know that's one that's a little bit hard to keep in place in your brain. All right, I don't think this is how you want to build your disaster recovery plan. So in HIPAA, an emergency plan needs to be made of both a contingency plan and an incident response plan. The emergency contingency plan is made up of 3 parts. Although these plans account for incidents like ransomware, they're also used for things outside of your control: natural disasters, building fires, etc. Anything that would significantly disrupt the way you practice online. Even COVID, which most everyone here has lived through being in a healthcare practice during that. I personally lived in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, so I know what happens when your healthcare providers just don't have a data backup or disaster recovery plan in place. You just have lost, as a patient, all of your records. So it is a requirement of HIPAA and that accountability part of HIPAA. What are the 3 parts? Data backup requires that PHI is not destroyed when a disaster strikes. So an exact copy of your PHI has to be produced and stored somewhere, probably not in the same place, right? A disaster recovery plan establishes that specific procedures for restoring data. So the plan itself also should be stored in more than one place. So put that in your lockbox at your bank or wherever, but it needs to be accessible when a disaster hits so that you can use said plan. And then emergency mode operations plan ensures that the critical business processes continue to maintain the security of PHI. So if there's an extended power outage, how do you ensure the offices and the equipment are secure? Things like that. How are you going to maintain critical operations? So the goal of these 3 parts combined is to maintain critical operations and minimize your loss to your business and maximize your availability to your patients. So we should define the time periods, like what needs to be done in the first hour, day, or week. That's part of that. Establishing a plan of action, what events would trigger the emergency plan, so there's no ambiguity about that. Is a power outage for 2 hours uh, kicking off the emergency plan, or does it need to be for 48 hours? Having those definitions in plan. It should be understood by all types of employees. So again, it's not ambiguous whether you're going to the office or not going to the office or doing the other actions in the plan. We want to make sure that we communicate the plan and the roles and responsibilities to everyone within the organization in advance of anything. Establishing testing exercises in advance, really great idea. Reviewing the plan on a regular basis, etc. And then finally, this testing plan should just be something that feels regular, the same way that when you're in school, you would do your fire drills. These are the types of exercises that allow your staff members to get familiar with what to do, where to get the resources, etc. All right, where are you backing up your data? That is a good question. So good to adopt a 3-2-1 approach. So this is where you have 3 copies of data on 2 different media and store 1 copy in a secure location. And if you have a cloud-based EHR, it can be on your cloud-based EHR, but make sure that they are also not impacted by the same types of disasters that you might be stuck by. All right, incident response planning. This refers to what plans need to be in place when you have those incidents that you've already defined with your organization. What is a security incident? What to do when the incident is suspected? Who is responsible for responding? How quickly do those actions need to be taken? Roles and responsibilities when responding. Who will contain the outage, the incident, if it's something that is sort of if it's an IT incident and that incident can potentially get bigger, you have had a data breach, but it could access other parts of your organization. Important for you to know who is supposed to put up those firewalls digitally to be able to make sure that that doesn't turn into a larger breach than it could be. A plan for documentation and communication of that plan. So how is the plan going to be documented? And then how will you make sure that you are documenting what does happen, not just what was supposed to happen? All right. We are almost at the end here. So, kind of in summary, now that you understand the risks and hopefully you feel more informed to take action. Some practices, there's kind of different ways to deal with HIPAA. Some people take a DIY documentation approach, low cost, high time and effort, and it's a lot of practices prefer this. Some use a external third party software to help them through the process. Cost is medium, time and effort is medium. So it means that you've got sort of a co-pilot on making sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do. So it's kind of like a DIY approach, but it's like a assisted DIY approach. It reduces the administrative burden. It reduces the burden that you would need to go source all of the documents yourself, talk with the legal teams to be able to produce procedures and policies, etc. And there's all sorts of options out there, from one-off tools to all-in-one solutions. And then the sort of highest cost, lowest time effort is just outsourcing that to someone else. I'm going to have someone come in and they're just going to do all my HIPAA stuff. It works if if you're a large enough organization to make that worth the time and effort. It certainly is luxurious to have an expert to dive into your organization. It leaves less work for your administrative team, but it's obviously the most expensive option by, a factor of 10 or more. So we are right on time here. We're going to finish out with 10 tips to protect you in your practice, and then we're going to close it up and give you a little bit of options for some content that we wanted to share before the top of the hour. So, tip number 1, update HIPAA plans, policies, and procedures. So, I think that that came through loud and clear. If you have it documented, that is half the battle. So just having a single place to document it. Um, Document how your PHI is accessed and secured. So taking that inventory of where your PHI exists physically and digitally, and then being able to say, how is that accessed how is that accessed physically and digitally? And this is really kind of the core to developing what I like to call that culture of compliance. So knowing where things are, how they are being protected, and everyone having the same understanding of the policies and procedures. I hope you probably will have that $1.5 million fine lodged in the back of your brain. As an example, that's not going to happen with your practice because you're going to obtain all of the business associates agreement when applicable. If in doubt, get a business associates agreement. It's not a big deal. The professionals that work with your organization are going to be familiar with the process. So make sure that everyone that has access to PHI has that business associates agreement in place, signed, dated, and countersigned. Document your HIPAA compliance product progress. We didn't really talk about this, but it's important to know that if you ever are audited or investigated, that your progress matters. So, kind of in those four buckets of what's the tiers of fines associated with each kind of violation. If you've been making progress towards your compliance, that speaks a lot. And so the HIPAA risk assessment is kind of the centerpiece of your assessment of your entire program. If you are completing that, you're supposed to complete it annually, but if you complete it more regularly and document how you are changing your policies and procedures, changing the way that you do your business to better protect patient data, that matters. That really does. So that's a big one. Don't share your patient information without authorization. It probably is something that you all do already, but it's a good reminder. When is it required? When is it not required? And making sure that there's never a time where you just kind of fudge the rules a little bit and send something out without that written patient authorization. Train your employees on the dangers of phishing and cyber attacks. So, as much as they need to be trained to HIPAA, specifically the regulations around privacy and security, also just being generally aware and keeping up with the trends in the industry, um, knowing when to highlight something as a potential phishing attack or knowing when to alert someone as a cyber attack and teaching each other. That's part of that culture of compliance. Being proactive with your HIPAA compliance. Like I said, I've had the unfortunate experience of being in a city that was very turned upside down through a very large scale emergency, and it matters. It matters if there's a plan in place. It's critical to have the plan, and that can save hours. It can save days. If you're looking to protect patient data, it can be the difference between having a few items leaked and having a lot of items leaked. If you have a physical emergency that requires you to shut the office, you want to continue to be able to provide data to those that you're serving. And likely you're not going to be able to wing your way through it. You need to have the plan in place. Exploring insurance options or reviewing your current policy. It's good to know what's covered, what's not covered. It's not a safe catch-all, but it is a nice kind of addition to a culture of compliance and a fully express compliance program. Regularly review your training and train staff on the importance of HIPAA and compliance. So minimum requirement once a year, minimum requirement to train folks as soon as they come in the door and start touching PHI. So those are non-negotiables, but also having just a general culture of compliance and making sure that you have your compliance officer designated. Oftentimes it's the office manager, and that person really embraces that responsibility for protecting patient data. Oh my goodness, the last one. Create and foster a culture of compliance. Couldn't have said it more often. This is where it's at. You're here because you are interested in learning more about HIPAA, and that's a very good sign. So I hope that everyone learned something today. Thank you for your time. I'm going to pass it on to Derek to conclude this, and then we do have. Would love for you to stay on the line. We do have a few more things that we'd like to share with you.
Thank you so much, Audrey, for all of that. That was wonderful. Yes, so that concludes our CE portion of the webinar today. But we're not done yet. So if you've noticed in the chat, I've dropped a couple of links in there for you. One is for our gap assessment, and the other one is for a demo. Audrey's going to speak to both of these, giving us a little teaser demo, and then also speak to the gap assessment as well. I just want to remind you, just in regards to the CE credit itself, just look out. We will be communicating that via email within the next couple of weeks. So take advantage of that. If you, again, if you're leaving right now, we have that survey at the end as well. It's your opportunity to let us know how we did, but also more importantly, what else do you want to hear about? We want to hear from you. So it's really important. It's our way to just see how you're doing, see how you're feeling. And then finally, even if we're not able to get to it today, there is a question and answer functionality within the Zoom here. Please ask away. We will follow up with you even if we aren't able to get to those questions live. So take advantage of that as well. So with that being said, Audrey, I will send it back over to you before we do a final goodbye to everyone today.
All right. Thank you so much, Derek. I told you I'm very passionate about compliance and I'm the SVP of product here at Rectangle Health. So I wanted to tell you about our compliance product. Um, we have a way that you can stress-free. We talked about those three different ways that you can kind of manage your program. We're in the middle. We provide software that helps make it easy for your practice to understand how you can better adhere to HIPAA. We've got all of the policies and procedures that are already written and vetted by our lawyers, so you don't have to source those or keep them up to date or anything like that. You just have to incorporate them into your HIPAA binder, and we allow you to store that digitally with us. So we're very excited about this. We've been making some big improvements on this. I'm going to give you a little taste of what that looks like. In just a moment, I'm going to jump into the product itself. I did want to spend a minute on a HIPAA Gap Assessment and the HIPAA Risk Assessment. So the Risk Assessment is a very extensive survey that you take when you have the product. The gap assessment helps you see the big picture. So the gap assessment is something, it's a short questionnaire, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes to complete, and it helps you understand, kind of generally speaking, where you sit. When you get into whatever product you choose, then you will likely have more detailed questions and surveys that help pinpoint exactly what actions you need to take. But that's why we use the gap assessment, is to, if you're interested in talking with us, we'd love to discuss what your gap assessment shows and where we might be able to help and how easy and it is to do that in our tool. In terms of compliance, I think we're just going to jump into it. This is what our compliance product looks like. We have HIPAA and OSHA in our compliance product. And we do offer dental CE credits through there. So I'm going to jump out. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Then I'm going to open up my tab. I'm going to then share again. We practiced this, so I hope it works. All right, I think it's there. Can you guys see my desktop?
Yep.
Thanks. All right, so this is our compliance product. This is a view that as an admin you would see when you first log in, and it tells you all the things you got to do. So on the top here, we've got a sort of an overall score for your HIPAA compliance program, overall score for your OSHA compliance program. And then we highlight your HIPAA risk assessment, that really important survey that kind of gives you that really detailed view of your HIPAA compliance program. And then all of the things that you need to do are down here in this task manager. So any of these you can jump right into. It'll take you to the place in the application where you can take action on this. So we talked about that emergency response plan. We've got all the questions that you would need to answer in terms of putting together the solid emergency response plan. You put it in here, you save it, you can print it, but it's here digitally in your digital binder, or you can print it out and put it in a physical binder, or both if you're a type A like myself. So it's this is the place where you can manage both your HIPAA compliance program and your OSHA. So we didn't talk about OSHA today, but we know that many, if you're employing folks in a medical practice, that you have some OSHA regulation that you also need to be adhering to. And we pull out the things that are the most important, and similarly make it really easy for you guys to take action on all of those different tasks that you need. And then finally, the HIPAA risk assessment is pretty easy to use. You've got your HIPAA risk assessments from the ages. When you want to go back and improve, as we said, document how your HIPAA risk assessment is improving over time, you can just go in, create a new one, and you can start with the last version of it. You can select that, and then you get started. So all of your previous answers are filled out. You might just want to go to one or two of them, update what you're doing now versus what you did before, save it, and then it's saved back here in your risk assessment. You've got that record over time on how you are improving your compliance program and really creating that culture of compliance.